Hello everyone. I wanted to do one last video explaining pretty much my workflow on uh, how I stylize my own assets, because many of you have asked like how do you achieve a specific look or something. So that's why I'm doing this video. So this might take a while because I've never stylized this model here, which was given by the amazing Stevie Brown. Here we go. You can check it out. This is the Sketchfab model. I just wrote to him and asked him if I could use it, and he was kind enough to pass me the FBX file. Now the FBX file has been loaded, and I also loaded up the materials and all the textures of it. And as you can see here, it looks very different because this one's shaded with a default Maya Lambert, and this one's has pretty much a flat shading. We can, of course, enable lights, enable shadows through the normal viewport buttons, but let's concentrate on that later on. So first, let's stylize this. As you might see, all of the FBX file, it's all combined into one piece of mesh. So, and it has three different materials. So I can see this in a hypershade. It actually has three different materials, which is this one, the plate, which is the cloth here. This is a summer palette, which pretty much gives color to everything. And then there's the summer ground, which gives the color to the ground. It's just an old material that was there. All right. So since all of this is one mesh, whenever I click the material button, all three nodes will be selected, but you won't be able to see all of them here. I mean, you can, of course, switch around, but no, this is actually another node. This is the file node. So you cannot simply use the material in this case because multiple objects there's multiple materials in the selected object, so that won't work. So I'll have to work with a hypershade to get around this. So the first thing I do is to assign basically MNPR materials to the entire scene, to all the scene elements. To do this, the easiest way is to basically, I right click, I select the objects with the material, and then you see, okay, this is the material that has that object. And what I'm gonna do here is I go to mesh, separate. So what this gives me is a separated mesh, and I can easily use my tools now. Whenever I click this one, I will select the plate material. Whenever I click this one, it's going to be between the ground and the color palette. Let's see what this selects. Yeah, it selects the ground. So the next thing I'll do is to separate the ground from it. So I just choose this, select objects with material. As you can see, oh, the bubble is also included there. It's interesting. So we go the same process. We go mesh, separate. Once we have that, we have this one here, which is the mesh with the color palette, the summer palette, the ground, which has its own ground material, and then we have the cloth that has as well its own material. So that's perfect. We separated them, so now our tools are working fine. So let's get started. So first of all, since we separated geometry, I'm gonna go edit, delete all by type, history. So this will give us a clean slate. There we go. Now we have the palette, which is pretty much everything in the scene that has the material of the palette material. Then we have the sweater here. We have the bubble, and we have the ground. Let's get started. So the first thing I'll do is I'll just select this, and I'll assign basically materials to this. So I'll just choose the default one for starters, and there we go, it turns blue. Now I'm gonna adapt this material, then save it as a preset so that I can work faster with the other ones. So I'll just go here to material, and let's put the albedo texture back, which is this one. The color tint to white because there's already albedo to it. So now we're getting some color. Remember, when using textures, you might want to reduce the dilute paint because the albedo already contains how diluted or how much white basically there should be, right? I'm still gonna have some, So to have this nice kind of look. So with this here, let's do the next one. Wait, let's save it first. So I'm gonna save one here. I'm just gonna put one of my defaults, textured. So once I have this, I'll save. So this is my textured material, which was created from a screenshot there. So now that I have this, I'm gonna do this without load textures because I don't want to load the textures that I have there. Once I load that up, nice. Then I go to the material and I'll load the albedo texture, which is the ground. So now this is kind of funky because there seems to be some sort of transparency issues there. Let me see what happens. No, it doesn't work very well. So yeah, I'm suspecting that the PNG with the alpha is kind of causing problems here in this case. Yeah, but never mind, we can actually simulate this ground. We don't need to stick to the specific texture, although we can use it. Let me make just this ground a little bit bigger. Yep. So basically we're just gonna fade everything, dilute things outward, which would create the same effect I believe that the artist intended here. So we're gonna have like a center of focus, and then everything will be diluted towards the paper. So what else is missing? This one here is missing, so I'm gonna load the preset and I'm gonna bring back the texture file, which is the plate. All right, and the last one might be the bottle. Oh wow, the cap is actually material of the rest. All right, let's load the bottle. And for this one, I'll actually come here and I'll tint it a little bit. No albedo texture. I'm gonna do this a bit brighter. Yeah, why not? Like that. Okay, so this gives us a good start. Now all the materials in the scene are MNPR materials, which means that they will support all the art-directed tools, right? So this slide is getting a little bit on the way, so I'll just get rid of its visibility. All right, so let's start stylizing. The first thing I want to do is the ground. It's kind of disturbing me, these kind of weird artifacts here. So let's go from higher to lower. I mean, we have not really bothered about style presets or the configuration tool. I kind of like to do this in the end, though. Why not? Let's see what kind of paper would fit this better. So an ingress, this is more like a charcoal paper. So if we come here and the substrate will tilt the light direction, you will see a better pattern. Let's increase the roughness. So yeah, this could be interesting. Let's try a different one, Burgund. I kind of like Burgund, but the effect is very subtle unless you really increase the roughness of it. Of course, this is a bit exaggerated, but yeah. Let's see, Fabriano. Let's increase I kind of like Fabriano for this one, now that I'm seeing it. Yep, I think I'll work with Fabriano. So the first thing I'll do is go to pigment density and increase this a little bit. So this will basically just accumulate pigment in the values of the paper. You can see this very nicely in the ground. The edge darkening intensity is pretty much the default values. I kind of like them. That's why I set them as default. So you can see here we have a subtle edge darkening intensity. Maybe we can increase that up a little bit. Increase the width. No, I'll put it to 5. Kind of like that. So thick edge darkening, bleeding radius, bleeding threshold. All of these settings, I'm going to put that later on. So more importantly, I kind of like the light to be from the top. In general, yep. It's kind of like if you're painting a watercolor, it's having a light from the top, literally. So, all right, let's get started. So I'm gonna come here, down all the levels of control. We talked about material presets. We haven't really modified many of the material attributes because these objects have textures, so I don't find myself tweaking the material too much if they have textures already applied to it. So I'm gonna go down the rabbit hole, and this is yeah, we're gonna be adding some procedural stuff to this. First of all, I'll introduce some noise to it. This is way too big, and I kind of will prefer this to be a 2D noise. Then let's bring that down. So this gives us some nice variety overall. Gonna do the same thing with a dry brush. Ooh, this is giving us some nice fractals here. Let's increase this. Let's make it 2D as well. So what this does is if I go way beyond, it will give us some nice dry brush or granulated kind of effects. I kind of prefer it more for the granulation. Basically, it's increasing the pigments in the values of the paper. Let's tone this down a little bit. All right, so I'm kind of happy with how the effect is turning out here. I'm gonna go to color bleeding and stuff like that later on. Let me go down to vertex space because I want to locally adapt certain things. So I want to dilute some stuff. Let me select this. I choose my dilute brush, and there we go. And I'll start diluting stuff. Now that I've noticed, this is gonna be tricky because the ground here only has 4 vertices, so in a way whatever I do will be applied to these 4 vertices, and the center will be gone, basically. Like this, it's gonna interpolate between this control parameter and this control parameter, and if both are of each vertex and if all of them are diluted, everything will be diluted. So we have a slight problem here. We're gonna need to be changing this plane. But once you have vertex colors assigned to an object, modifying the amount of vertices that it has can produce some problems. So what I'm gonna do is I'll delete this. I'm gonna create a new plane. Let's make this big. Now with this sort of geometry, you have a lot more control points to art direct, basically. So with this here, let's make this kind of even. I like when numbers are perfectly matched. With this here, let me delete the construction history so that we don't have any weird stuff there. We have just basically a clean mesh. What you see is what you get. Now we can select the plane. We need to prep it again. So I'll just select this one. I'll just load the default. But then I'm gonna go here because we deleted the plane, but we didn't delete the material. So let's see which one of these. This one is the plane. The easiest way to see which one is what is here, the material viewer. I find shader effects doesn't really show you the swatches here, which is very unfortunate, but well, at least we get to use shader effects and have access to the source code right away. So it's pros and cons. So let's assign this here, and you might notice this turned white for a very simple reason, is that in the settings, the vertex control are on, and this one has no vertices painted on. So for now, I'll keep it off. I'll adapt this guy to where it kind of was. 90. Nope. Minus 90. Wonder. I'll just leave it at 0 actually. So adapt this to where the tree trunk was. There we go. Okay, and now if I hit this and start painting, now as soon as you start painting, the material will change. You won't really notice this, but all the vertex control sets will be created and the vertex control will be enabled right away as soon as you start painting. So it's quite handy. All right, let's do this. Let's paint this bigger. So what I want is kind of like to get rid of these edges. Yep, by basically giving it a point of focus to the scene. Oops, sorry. Diluting things around. This kind of funky stuff here. Now this is much easier with the stylus, but right now I'm using a mouse, so that's all I got right now. So I want to kind of like dilute here, kind of have a center of interest there. There we go. All right. So now I'm kind of happy with the ground. It's kind of like, it's not perfectly circular. It gives some variety. We can tweak that later on, but it gives us a nice overall feel to it. All right, let's continue. So now I want to select the girl and I'm gonna add some procedural stuff to it as well. Oh, this is way too small. So I want to give some natural looking variation to it. That's why I created these procedural noises, because previously I was painting this variation everywhere, but I got a lot of users who said like, I don't really want to paint every single vertex of a complex scene. So these are tools that will help you achieve the look that you're after in a much, in a much faster way. So yeah, this gives you some kind of nice variety overall. May want to achieve some more variety on the girl. There we go. Okay, so now you can see there's a more diluted part here, some other parts that are more concentrated. So we give it more this pigment turbulence, which is more natural of watercolors. So the same thing I'll do for granulation. So add some noise here. I'll make this way bigger. So for now, I can keep it like that. It's kind of looking at this dry brush here. I'm not a very big fan of dry brush sometimes. It really needs to match the right place. So I usually tend to come here and make things just darker and then decrease the strength of the effect. So always remember that, by the way, always remember to let the tool settings load up when you're working with, especially with paint effects. Like whenever you open one of these tool settings are going to open up. This is very important for the vertex space effects, for the paint effects. Why is that so? Because these actually will modify the tool settings here. So whenever you're changing something, you're changing these tool settings in the background, which paints a specific color in a specific control set so that you get the effect that you want. So it's very important to let the tool settings load And after it's loaded, feel free to close it. It's still gonna be in the background, so you can still use it. Okay. So we have added pigment turbulence, granulation. We were about to add some distortion. So if we come here on the substrate distortion, so let's get that up a bit. No, just not too much, otherwise it becomes very disturbing in a way. Okay, but I kind of like this gives it a more natural look, and as soon as I go to double, it's gonna look much better. I don't integrate here. It's gonna look way better, and you see the distortion will look much more natural. Let's keep it to normal for now. Okay. Next, we can add some procedural distortion as well, but I've not really found it that useful yet, actually. So I would be very interested to see if you guys end up using it or not as well. So this will give you at certain parts a different distortion, and it works the same way as all the rest, but it's gonna be difficult to gauge the scale of it, just because of how it works. We can increase the noise, and then we can probably see where it's being applied on much better. But yeah, I don't find myself using this very much. I prefer to keep this setting global, but there might be some of you guys that really want to push this and paint this distortion in a specific part. So I have it here for now. So the edge darkening, that I like to give it some variation over the entire model. So let's do this. So there we go. So you can see here there's some parts with a much darker edge darkening, but this is the scale is way too small. So I like to give it something like this. And notice like there's some parts that are just way too thick. That's because the global setting is actually 5. Let's switch it to 3 so that we have some more natural looking edges here. Just like this. Let's decrease the width, some parts, decrease the darkening. There we go. Now we achieve a more natural looking variation on the edge darkening. There we go. Okay, I think I'm happy for now. The color bleeding is something that in material space, it kind of looks cool, but I don't see that. I mean, some of you guys might really like it. Oops. So you can see it kind of looks like wetness is going all over, which is kind of like a cool effect, but I don't find myself using this more often. I think especially for gaps and overlaps, color bleeding, edge darkening, these are more local effects that you really need to apply consciously on a specific part of the geometry. Now these are here just in case you want to use them. But yeah, let's go to the real bread and butter of MNPR, which is the true local control. Now before that, I forgot about this bottle here. Why not? Let's give it some pigment turbulence too. Yeah, kind of like that. And some granulation. Yep. Let's get rid of the dry brush there. Reduce this a little bit. There we go. Okay. So right now we have a very interesting result. We can also enable shadows to see how that looks like. Now shadows are using shadow maps, so in order to really control that, we can go here to the shadow, go to use depth map shadows, and depending on your computer, you might want to go very high here for a much better quality of shadows. So for example here, if I, let's say, make it 1024, you're gonna see there's a lot of very big pixels actually that are interpolated on a bigger scale, and that's why you get this kind of staircase So the best you can do is put it as high as your computer can go. It won't go higher than this usually, like it has a limit. The limit is usually at 4K, that's why I put it to 4096. And if we come here, I like to control the focus myself. Why? Because while Maya tries to automatically find the size where the shadow needs to be applied to, it applies to the size of whatever you have in the scene, but we have here a very focused model. So I can change this to my liking, and as you can see, the smaller I get here, the more detail of this 4000 pixels of the shadow map will I be getting. At some point, of course, you start seeing this is the limit of the shadow map, so let's bring that up. So I'm seeing that for this scene, I'm gonna need around 45. All right, so now I have a much cleaner shadow casted on all the objects. So always remember also here, you can choose your shadow color. So if you want, so this is summer, so we might want to have something more orange, or in this case, maybe red for the shadows. This is basically adding light to that specific part. So as you can see here in the white of the shirt, you are seeing the shadow color much better. But usually shadows are a bit bluish, so though maybe not necessarily in the afternoon, but I kind of like, yeah, let's put some orange like here. Yeah, that looks cool. But as you can see, the shadow has kind of disappeared because it's that bright. So let's bring that up. And make it more orange, or more reddish. All right, so now we have a very clear casted shadow. Now that we have said that, I'll turn this off so that we can concentrate on the object. So now it's time to, let's go back a little bit. Let's modify the materials, see what we can push here. Tangent is a very interesting setting. I like it a lot because it really changes, really can be a lot of difference when you're changing things towards the brighter hue, basically from orange. This will go towards yellow, right? And this might be a nice effect now for this afternoon, kind of summer afternoon picture that we're trying to do here. So I'll keep that up. The dilute paint, I actually kind of like what the mild dilute paint that we had. The diffuse factor is kind of interesting because if you put it to 0, it's going to be flat shaded, only if you of course don't have cambiante and dilution. So, but I still kind of like to, especially for shadows, this is very important because the more diffuse you have it, the more casted shadows you'll have, as you can see here. If I put the diffuse factor to 0, you're not going to see any casted shadows. So I'll put it to 0.2 like we had it. This kind of gives a good balance between its diffuse behavior and the flatness that we would like to achieve. So with that, the dilute color, I keep it to white. Yes. Shade override, you can use this if you want to introduce some sort of like background color, which why not? Let's just, for the sake of it, do it. So as you can see here, it's gonna be the shade. Normally it goes towards darkness, basically black. But if you can put here some blue, you're gonna see that the shading will be basically on the brightest spot, it's gonna be the normal color, and as soon as it gets shaded, it's gonna acquire this shade color. But yeah, this blue is not working well. And actually, for this scene, maybe just a little bit of, no, I actually like it. I don't need a shade override. maybe a little shade wrap. This will basically wrap some light of the shade color on the unshaded area. But this needs to be, I'll put it a bit bluish, kind of like, you can see the effect here. This is white, normally it's black, right? And then we can add some bluish tint to it. All right, so I'll keep it like that. You can see this mostly in the white parts because it's just basically adding light of this color in the shaded areas according to the shade wrap. So I'll put it like this. Let's make it a bit darker and saturated, like so. Yeah, I kind of like that. Then of course you can do things like highlight roll-off if in case you want to have the girl kind of like have this very strong highlight, and modify the transparency if you want, but I don't think it's needed for this case. And then the color tint, no, I'm actually happy with the textures that we loaded. And these are the procedural stuff. These are the stuff that we actually modify here. So for example, if we go to the pigment turbulence, right? If I go up here, you will see that the density, intensity here will change, right? So this is basically an abstraction of all of these attributes that get created on the fly. So let's go to our last piece, which is the very targeted, very localized paint effects. So I'm gonna start accumulating pigment in some parts. I like to add some variation to the hat here, maybe also to the shirt, not having such clean leg. So this will give us the additional detail that we might have not achieved using the procedural stuff, right? And the nice thing is you can kind of fake different things here. So you can fake some ambient occlusion by increasing the pigment density. Now this is very bright, so you won't see much difference. So you see some slight accumulation, some slight darkening, but since it's so bright, it's going to be a bit difficult to visualize. All right, let's continue with this girl. This part here is a bit too even. So just adding some color variation to it so that it basically looks more natural. That's what we are after. So this stage can take a while depending on how much detail you wanna change. For example, here I want to make this part much darker because it's very shaded, and the procedural dilution diluted it quite a bit. So what we're doing is we're kind of overriding this, and yeah, this looks better. So she looks more as if she would be having contact with this tree trunk. I'm gonna do the same thing here. Just accumulating some color in certain areas. Oops. Same thing for the tree. Oops. Right. What's happening here? Now we have. Let's concentrate on the girl first, and then we'll concentrate on the tree trunk and everything else. So copy this part here. more concentrated, just adding some variation here and there, making it look more natural in that sense. Oops, that was too much. Let's modify a little bit here, the glasses, whoops. Face, add some detail on the nose, brows. Hey, they kind of have a very nice edge darkening there. Now, these are things that are not necessarily going to be seen in your shot, but you know, we're in 3D, and for the purpose of this demo, I'm just going to do this. Just painting some pigment accumulation, make it look more real, more like the real watercolor. So there we go. Now you might notice I'm mostly darkening, but this operation is entirely up to you, what you prefer. Since I already have the shadows casted, it's better for me to view basically what needs to be done. I can also, of course, dilute certain parts. So you can spend a lot of time doing these changes. For the sake of this video, I'm not gonna go that much into detail, but I've spent on some pieces, I've spent really hours trying to achieve what I'm after. So it really depends how far you want to go with the art direction. For example, this is way too even for watercolor. So I'm just adding some variety here, concentrating some pigment. Also granulation, I'm gonna add some granulation to certain parts. So you see this more concentration on certain parts in the values of the paper. Now here I also want to concentrate some stuff. Why not the armpits? It's just for the sake of adding some variety to it. Right, something else that I want to do is the backpack. It looks way too simple. So I'm gonna add some more color. Some color here. And I'm gonna go to the granulation. Add some granulation so it looks a bit more real in general. There we go. Now on the ground, I want to add some, I definitely want to accumulate on areas that are close to the girl and to the bike, of course. It maybe should be time for me to save and yeah, then continue it. So we're having a quite nice result already. Something that I like to experiment with is with the atmosphere tint. So this is an afternoon kind of sunset kind of painting that we're approaching here. So let's add some atmosphere tint. So what this will do is, upon distance, it's gonna add the specific color until it's fully colored. So we can tweak this to each scene depending on what you're after. So I've got, whoa, this is way too much. So this probably starts at 25. Yeah, 25 is around here. And then in this will go to 150. So in general, we have like a nice orangey transition. Might be a bit too much. Let me tone that down. And I've noticed there's a part there that is not diluted. There we go, got rid of it. And let's continue. I'm gonna add a color tint to this material. Gonna make it a bit more greenish, but greenish more towards light, kind of. I might even stick without the albedo texture, so, but not with that tint. It's just a tint right now. So this part here is way too diluted. This brush is way too big. By the way, with B you modify the brush. I hope you know that. I don't think I'm in the right. So now let's see which. I think that's part of the procedural stuff that is giving me this diluted value, but never mind, we can keep it there. So yeah, we're getting there, one step at a time. I'm gonna add some variation to the bike. Certain parts of the bike, I'm just adding some accumulation of pigments, just to give it more variety, like I said previously. Now the tree trunk, also an interesting candidate. It's quite dark, so I'll get some dilution here and there. Inside, since it's inside, I'm gonna accumulate rather than dilution. This guy here needs to be a bit darker, give it some variety. So depending on your shot, on what you're showing, you can art direct this differently. This is pretty much like you're painting things around, right? So in a big production, I would recommend to actually art direct the assets and then reference them in, so that first they are consistent, and second you don't spend this amount of time doing each one of these assets. So I'm just giving more variation here and there. Normally I would separate this one in a material on its own, and then I would simply do this variation with procedural stuff, with procedural assignments at a smaller scale, so that basically you don't need to add so much turbulence manually, right? So this flower is quite pretty. I like it. All right, let's wrap this up. I'm sure you guys want to try this out yourself and don't want me to talk too much. I hope you have been learning something about how I approach the stylizations that I do. Just here's some values. All right, so we have this here. Let me actually do the glasses look a little bit too diluted. It's the last tweak that is really necessary in my opinion. So let's make this smaller. I kind of like this kind of effect that I got there. Yeah, make her look awesome. I'm gonna do it a bit darker. Nice. All right, now that I have this here, I could add some gaps and overlaps, but I don't think this piece needs to be sketchier. We can try smooth shading it, like I'm just hitting 3 on the keyboard to get a subdivision preview. It looks kind of cool. I don't know which one to keep. This one looks more real, this one looks more stylized. I'll keep the stylized for now. But you get drill, you can try it out, you can find your own workflow. I think this part here is a bit too diluted. Kind of distracting. All right, now that we have that, we can have it at double the size so that we have a much nicer result. Let me save this scene. This part here might be a bit too concentrated. Let me change that quickly. The edge there is quite strong. I think it's simply because of how the topology runs here. And the shadow might be contributing a lot to it as well. No, not necessarily. Yeah, it's the topology. As soon as I subdivide it, you get a much better view. This might also be the darkening here. The procedural darkening that was simply assigning a very dark value there. Yeah, that's it. So now I can bring it back, and we don't have that strong edge anymore. All right. So yeah, let's render this out. I think I'm quite happy with the result right now. I mean, this is just a quick 30-minute stylization. And it's just, I didn't have a reference. I had like a picture in mind, but that was entirely up to me to do whatever I want with it. The last fix. So as you can see, you can spend days fixing stuff until you kind of finally get the result you want. That's entirely up to you. That's the beauty of MNPR. You can add direct to your heart's content, and I think that's very valuable in general, because you know, we're not just applying a single filter and be happy with it. No, you can really push things to whatever look you desire, and I think that's a beautiful thing. Like that's a thing that, in my case as an artist, I've always wanted something like this, and being able to develop it and to offer to you guys, and the reception that I've gotten from you, it makes me very happy in general. So I want to thank you all for taking part of this user study, and if you have been watching this very long walkthrough, I want to thank you for your interest. I hope you have learned something. The last thing I want to do is I want to render this out because I think it looks pretty cool. So let's go there. I'm gonna save it as full HD. I think I'm gonna be happy for now, a JPEG. Let's save it on the desktop. Let's call it summer. And once we have that, the desktop, there we go. We have our piece. Thank you guys for watching. I hope this was useful, and I can't wait to see what you guys have been up to. See ya.